Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Curious Mind podcast. My name is Gabriel Ellis, and I want to start a series today about loneliness, the new loneliness, as I call it, social isolation, which are phenomena that, of course, we have been knowing for a long time, but this trend seems to have accelerated a lot with the upcoming and strengthening of social media in daily life, and also increased slightly artificially by the coronavirus situation a few years ago, but it didn't go back to normal. There are residual effects from that apparently in our daily social life. And so I think it is important to raise the topic also because, from a clinical perspective, it is such a frequent topic of conversation and of sadness in my therapy sessions with my clients. It comes up as one of the most regular aspects of, be it dissatisfaction with life, with work, private life, and so on. The social isolation is a topic that is there in the background. Rarely it is seen as the most important point that contributes to mental issues, but it is there as a factor. And again, and also from a clinical perspective, it plays a very important role. So today I want to introduce to the topic, to make you more sensitive to the topic. And in the following episodes, I want to give a deeper perspective on the deeper causes, the philosophical issues that are connected with that. For what reason, in order to understand why this has to be an issue. As long as we believe that it is a simple issue like many others, because supposedly, as some people believe, we can just learn to spend time alone with mindfulness, with appreciating all those nice solitary activities that I can do. As long as we believe this and don't understand how deeply rooted the existential need for friendships, exchange, relationships is, we don't really understand the topic, and we will not understand how devastating socially and personally the effects of isolation and loneliness are. So essentially, the isolation, loneliness are problems because we are social beings. Not that we are human first and then we somehow have a need to have some social bonds. No, we are embedded in society. We are embedded in relationships. An infant, a child cannot survive without its parents. The parents cannot survive with the society around it. It is so deeply ingrained inside of us that only when it's lacking, we realize the problems that it has. So it is inherently woven into the fabric of our soul, our mind, and our spirit. And I will come to more detailed analysis about this existential perspective in the next episode. To give you a few kind of cornerstones of the development so far of how this issue became so prominent in the first place, I will now detail some of the sociological reasons, and I will link to an article below. It's called The Antisocial Century, which appeared in The Atlantic, that goes into more details if you're interested in a broader perspective. But this article is focused on the US, which is similar in other Western or Westernized societies, but some of the effects are kind of in their gravity specific to the US culture. So what is important to understand is that the topic of isolation, of loneliness, has not come up only in the recent decade with the rise of social media. This trend has been going on for a very long time. In fact, since we can say after Second World War. What were the technical innovations that contributed to this development? Well, it was mostly two things that we don't consider problematic anymore, but they did start this trend, this development. The two are the car and the TV. The car allowed people to live at a place that is disconnected from the immediate social surrounding that they usually have, which means I can live at a place that is far away from my family. I can live at a place that is far away from my work. And so we have different social settings. It's more demanding to naturally meet. If I have the workshop in the village or in the town, then it's walking distance. I know the people around there. And typically, in the past, also the families would have lived close by, so that all of those different areas, important areas of life, were often in the very same area. The car allowed us, for the sake of convenience, for the sake of opportunities, to live somewhere else. And so meeting people, be it work colleagues after work or family or friends, became more disjointed, and it became more artificial and labor intensive. I did not just step out of the street on the street and naturally met people that I know, something that some of you still recognize from village life. You just go shopping and then you meet your neighbors, you meet your friends, you meet some relatives, and you have those chats. So the car allowed that to happen, and it continues to do so. To a similar extent, we can include trains and public transport. A second aspect is the TV. And what the TV does, it allows us to satisfy certain needs that I would otherwise satisfy in a social way, to do it at home alone, maybe with my core family, but less with friends, less with strangers, less to meet people in the so-called third places that I will come to. And then we have an extension of that. The TV technical satisfaction of needs did not stop there. We had in the 80s the popularization of gaming consoles. Then the first computers came up, like the Commodore 64, for example, popularized the home computer. And then, of course, the internet came in the 90s, the popularization of it, at least in the 90s, email, certain platforms, chat platforms, and then, of course, social media in the contemporary way as we have it today, with Facebook as a big player in the beginning, and then others came up as well, WhatsApp, TikTok, Instagram, and so on. So those interactions in social media, they replaced in-person interactions. And this is important. Also in the next episode, I will go more into it, because what happens in our mind is that when we engage in social media, it affects us as if we have dealt with people, as if we have spoken to them, as if we have discussed with them. And so it wears us out. And so after engaging in social media, we are less inclined to seek real life interactions, because we are already kind of exhausted and depleted, because our brain, our mind, our spirit has already done complex social calculations, so that our appetite for social interactions in the real world has gone down. And at the same time, the effects of social media are rather detrimental to mental health, and we are not able to recover or to fill our battery of satisfaction with real life interactions. Now, by the way, all of these aspects that I'll list now, I name them because they have the effect that statistically they contribute to the isolation of people. But it is not to say that they don't have their positives. So I don't judge or don't kind of assume at all. I don't want to pretend that social media is only negative, that the car is only negative, TV and internet and so on are only negative. Of course, they have the plus sides, but in looking at our social fabric, at the state of our societies today, looking back, we have to acknowledge and we have to understand that these technologies in the end might have done a disservice to mental health, might have done a disservice to the social fabric as it is today, as long as we have not figured out a healthy way to use those technologies. Maybe this would come from the companies themselves. Maybe it needs state intervention to kind of shape the influence of those technologies in a way that does us more good than harm. Okay, going back to those sociological reasons and conditions for how this big effect of loneliness and isolation came up. Certainly, there's another aspect that is important here, which is individualism. There has been a steady decline of thinking in communities, small communities, families, clans, big society. We see a steady decline of the role of authority, so that it's more easy today to question basically anything that supposed authorities say. That is known from the scientific perspective with the Dunning-Kruger effect, which means that today it is more easy for lay people and non-specialists to just very casually dismiss experts in their field with their, instinct wisdom, and to say those people, they are kind of closed up, they are in the ivory tower of academia. Actually, yes, they have PhDs and whatever, but they don't know anything about real life. So I, the layperson who has heard about this topic a little bit on the news about logistics and inflation and so on, my opinion is just as valid, or maybe even because of my superior instincts, is much more valid than the opinion of experts. And so this is just a symptom of the decline of authority. But what it means is that it reduces our willingness to listen, to engage in conversations, and pushes more forward this attitude of what do I actually think is true? And why would I listen to somebody else? I want to be listened to. And of course, it's a null sum game. If everyone thinks more that they should be listened to rather than to listen, then we don't have conversations. And we have another strengthening factor of individualism. There's a big aspect that is connected with transportation, which is the increased urbanization in the past 100 years, and the frequent relocations that go hand in hand with urbanization. When we have these trends, it means that people move into environments that are more anonymous, where it's less normal to have natural communities forming around my apartment, the place that I live. And it's more a pick and choose. It's more work in urban environments to find my peers, to find my groups, to find activities. There is more choice, of course, as I said. All of these aspects that contribute to isolation and loneliness have their positives, but the negative side is that urbanization first of all comes with a bigger anonymity and with more work to put into my mix of social interactions. To give you just very rough numbers, in the past 100 years, the urbanization rate, which means the part of the population that lives in urban environments, has increased in the US from 50% to 80%. So that today about 80% of the population of the US lives in urban environments, whereas in the past it was rather 50%. In Europe, the numbers are very similar. The increase in Europe was from 40% to 75%, very similar to the US, which shows that there are less communities in small town, village environments where people would have this natural social fabric. Many, many more people are exposed to a normal environment where they have to work to keep the social realm together, where dating comes with its issues in urban communities, making friendships, dissolving friendships, keeping for oneself, and so on. The pick and choose life of the city life with its advantages and disadvantages, and mostly of the disadvantages of increased isolation and loneliness. Another aspect that is somewhat connected, but still is worth mentioning as a separate factor, is that anxiety and depression are not only the effect of isolation, they're also a cause of isolation. If I get anxious for the reason that I might lose work, for example, which is not a social issue. It's not a social anxiety. If I get this anxiety, it makes me more withdrawn. It makes me more hesitant to go outside. I might be ashamed in front of acquaintances and friends when they ask me, how are you, to admit, that I feel miserable, or I put on a facade. And so I'm more exhausted when I come home after social interactions. So in short, anxiety and depression also lead to further isolation. And as we know from the past decades that the rates of anxiety and depression have gone up, this also contributes to the increase of isolation and loneliness in total in our society. There is a decline of third places. A third place is an expression for informal public gathering spaces that exist outside of the first place, which is home, and the second place, which is work. And I have witnessed this in my lifetime. I was born in the 70s. I grew up in the 80s mostly. And I have seen that those community places and also the involvement of people in communities, in volunteer work, in groups, in the rate that people would go out together and spend time, this has declined. This number is going down. And so, and of course, because of the factors that I mentioned before, there's more technological use, social media, and all these other aspects. What it means is that when the cities, when the communities, when they reduce the number of these third places, which can be community centers, cafes, pubs, libraries, parks, plazas, when they either reduce those places or people less frequently visit those places to interact with people, it means that there is less random interaction with a larger society, a larger community, which then inhibits people in their skills to deal with the other, to deal with other people. And so there is another source that I'm cut off from that might reduce my sense of loneliness and isolation. A number from the US is that adults have 30% less dinner or drinks with friends over the past 20 years. This is a dramatic decline and just shows how big the increase, how big this problem has become. There is some sort of an informal ministry in the UK for loneliness, which is another symptom of the problem having become so big that even officials feel that they have to care for it. A last aspect that I want to point out is increased economic pressures, less so for people who are in safe work environments, but for many other people, we have longer working hours. We have a gig economy where people have to find new jobs all the time to find new clients. For example, me as an online therapist, am in a similar place. And that this time, this stress, if you will, it reduces the time that is available for social engagements. And for these people and many other people too who are safely employed, it has become very normal that we're constantly learning. We need to do certifications, we need to do workshops, we need to maybe sometimes add another bachelor or master degree. So many people, also from in my experience, when I talk to people, the number of people who are constantly in the process of furthering and developing their knowledge and their qualification has increased dramatically. And this reduces their ability on the weekends to just meet friends, after work to just relax, to engage in phone calls, to meet people, and so forth. So there are many sociological factors that have contributed to this increase. And if you ask me, a dramatic increase when it comes to life quality and mental health of loneliness and isolation. The effects are can be seen in the mental health. We can see the effects also in politics. When people stay at home to have their diet of media and of interaction in the internet and social media, this has contributed a lot to the forming of echo chambers, when we don't really talk to people, to the complexity of their views, but the views are reduced to contributions on X, Instagram, Twitter, uh, other social media platforms. These are not environments where people exchange very differentiated insights into their thought world and their belief system. They are forced to reduce their own arguments, to distill them to points that lack nuance, that are harsher than they would be if I were to talk to them. Also, when I see someone face to face, I can see their body language. I can get more cues if what they say is meant in a hurtful way, in a derogatory way, in a condescending way, or if it's a spin, if it's more subtle, I can ask questions. So the decline in personal interactions of people had a dramatic effect on the culture or the attitudes with which I approach social discussions on social media in general. And this has led and contributed to a deterioration of the political discourse, the quality of the political discourse, so that this is not the only reason, but surely I think it's without doubt that the isolation that has developed over the past, let's say, 20 years has contributed to the political situations that we have today. More polarization, more radical attitudes, finding followers, and so forth. Another effect that we can see from more loneliness and isolation that is not just mental health is that family structures change. We have more single households today. We have more patchwork families. And this leads also to a reduced support system from family members in daily life. Just makes a difference if we see each other regularly, be it for family gatherings, for holidays, and so on, or if I work and live far away, and that the interaction with the family has been reduced to a minimum, and then we see each other just on high holidays. So I wanted to show with this very short summary of some sociological reasons and their effects of how deeply this development has affected us. It affects not only us as people who are maybe affected by loneliness and isolation, it also affects the others. If I personally don't feel so isolated, but a friend of mine does, this changes of how we interact. It changes the quality of our interaction, the quality of our relationship, my willingness to meet again. In general, another effect that comes with this isolation is interestingly that people become more picky. They're more ready to write people off. And so this affects not only the people, the lonely people, so to speak, but it affects the society as a whole, as I also showed with the example of how it affects the political discourse. Everyone is affected by this, whether you feel lonely or not. Good. So I hope it made you curious for the following episodes. In the next one, I will go deeper into the psychological and the philosophical context of how it matters and why it matters, who we surround ourselves with, and what it does to our mind, to our existence, if we get more and more reduced to individuals who surround themselves with an internet community, with social media. I hope to see you next time. If you have questions and suggestions to this topic, I would be happy to read them in the comments. And I see you soon.